Hey, before we get into the video, I would like to thank some Patreons who contributed to the channel. Ozzy0, James Westbrook Jr., Kid Named Finger, Thomas Haynes, Worst by TF2, Tulip Mango, Emerald Henry, Silent, and Soup for Days. Thank you all for contributing to the channel. Patreon link is in the description to help support the channel. Anything helps and you'll be eligible for benefits based on any amount you give. This is a bit of a different idea. This one was actually voted on by my Patreons for my first Ridonculous Race What If. I'm gonna be honest, going into this, I don't think a ton's gonna change, but I do think it'll just be interesting to see Geoff and Bridgette as a team, because I feel like they never really got enough prominent screen time on the seasons they were in for total drama. I don't want Bridgette and Geoff to be similar to any other dynamics we already see present on the cast, like reality TV pros and daters. I've decided to say that they continue to do the occasional TV hosting jobs, like how they did with the Aftermaths, and their team title is television host. It won't change anything significantly about their showing this season. I think it's just a fun new layer to make them stand out from the rest of the cast. Bridgette and Geoff have an introduction like the other teams, excited to take a break from the reality TV hosting jobs and just have some fun traveling around the world together. While Dawn is hosting the intro of the season, Bridgette and Geoff interject a bit, slightly judging a lack of gravitas. Dawn takes offense to it, but mostly ignores them and starts the race. When the elevator has all the buttons pushed by Dwayne, Bridgette and Geoff choose to wait out the elevator since they joined the show to have fun, and they'd think walking around the outside of the skyscraper would be a gorgeous sight and amazing moment, much more than just running up a dingy stairwell. Also, if there are more city, fame-like experiences as TV hosts, maybe they'd understand how fast elevators are, and though climbing the stairs would take a while, so it's not worth the effort. They share the elevator with the fashion bloggers that still make an insulting comment about overalls that a janitor hears on a floor they open up on, making him pour water on them and with a mop on their head. As both teams leave the elevator, Bridgette tries to be nice and tells them she thinks he overreacted a bit. The bloggers scoff and clearly agree while trying themselves off and making more digs at his fashion sense. Bridgette in a confessional with Geoff doesn't feel as bad for them now after taking more digs at him, because being the humanitarian she is, she would probably have a bit of a soft spot for service workers. Similar to the bloggers, Bridgette realizes as they look out to the windy, tall outside of the skyscraper that it's much more intimidating than she thought and is petrified with fear. They have a confessional where Geoff tries to psych up about how this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Bridgette agrees, but says so is petting a tiger in the wild, but that's a once in a lifetime because your lifetime ends there. Bridgette takes solace in sharing fear of the bloggers, as Geoff tries to encourage her it's safe, but fails at doing so repeatedly because of all the obvious dangers. The bloggers eventually encourage Bridgette to go with Geoff. She asks why, confused about their switch, and through some questioning figures out it's because they want them to prove it's safe first. And make an offhanded comment about how they think they're better, and if the world was to lose someone, they think they'd miss those cheesy shorts and basic baby blue jacket less. Bridgette is offended by the insult, chewing them out and joining Geoff to walk outside. She still struggles a bit with fear as she walks across, but with Geoff's support, they're able to get through the walk around, and after they do so while the fashion bloggers are going around, they knock on the glass to show Geoff having a mop on his head and Bridgette posing catty, clearly taunting them. With this much of a time save from them, I do think they'd find themselves in one of the 6 teams to get on the first flight. Of the original 6 teams to get on the first flight, Ice Dancers, Jocks, Owen Noah, Police, Best Friends, and Father-Son. Father-Son were the only ones not shown to go down the zipline, and given their history, I'm going to assume they were probably the last team to get on this first flight. So now with Bridgette and Geoff getting it handily before them, Father and Son will now be on the second flight, also meaning a team from the second flight will not be booted down into the last flight. And based on all the teams said to be on the second flight, sisters, geeks, vegans, mom-daughter, bloggers, and rockers, all of them are seen riding the zipline shortly after / with the teams that make it on the first flight, except for the rockers, so they'd now be booted down into the last flight. Bridgette and Geoff would be on the first flight and get to the all-in for selecting the spices. I do feel like even just being the kind of hippies that Bridgette and Geoff are, they'd be able to assess the spices pretty well. Maybe not 100% accuracy, but close enough. We didn't see Geoff and Brody choose them in the original, but they did end up getting 7th despite being on the last flight, so I think it's fair to assume they probably chose the spices pretty well. When they get to the stew part, Geoff would have to chug the stew now. It wasn't explicitly said what was in the stew, but it was a Moroccan stew, which typically does have meat, and Bridgette is a vegetarian, so she really wouldn't want to. Bridgette and Geoff both look at the bloggers arrive with their stew, glaring at them. Have a confessional where Bridgette admits as rude as the bloggers were being, they've seen on the shows they host how much rivalries can really hurt both sides, so they're gonna try and make amends. Also, Bridgette just being as kind as she is wouldn't like this drama, so she'd want to smash it anyway. Geoff himself says he still thinks they are way out of line for not liking his hat though, asking Bridgette for reassurance, who unconvincingly grits her teeth and says, "Yeah, your hat looks amazing, dear." Bridgette goes to talk to the bloggers, apologizing for taunting them yesterday. The fashion bloggers don't really care, but say, well, as long as you're apologizing because it's fully your fault for getting offended by some fashion advice, then you are forgiven. Bridgette is annoyed and tries to politely remind them that they started it with their rude comment. This causes another scuffle between the two, where Bridgette, having noticed earlier worry of getting their stew on their clothes, sticks her fingers in the stew, flicks some onto their clothes, and walks off. The bloggers are furious and declare to each other that this is war. They do really well in the challenge, but I don't think it would be enough to have them interfere with any of the original top 3 placements: Best Friends, Police, and Ice Dancers, because they aren't the most concerned with winning as much as the experience, and as seen with Geoff and Island's eating challenge, he really was taking in the delicacies, so I could see him being similar, of taking a bit of his time before chugging the stew to really enjoy the flavor. The father-son team got a camel that got exhausted pretty quickly, and since they are taking their spot, now in the first flight, it's reasonable to say that Bridgette and Geoff would probably end up getting their camel. Bridgette would be smart enough to let it take breaks instead of overexerting it like Dwayne to massively put it behind, but I do still think it would slow them down enough to prevent the top 3. Speaking of the father-son team, they're originally in a close race for last, so now that they've left at a later flight, it is possible to think maybe they're the ones that get eliminated. But most of their falling behind was due to the camel giving up on them, and looking back, their camel wasn't going any quicker or being pushed any harder than the other camels before it got tired. It was going the same speed as camels around it, and even a camel that was carrying Owen and Noah's team, obviously carrying Owen, seemed to be doing just fine. So it seemed a lot more issue of just like a lazy camel that they got. Obviously Dwayne made it worse by overexerting the lazy camel, but now they don't have the lazy camel at all, it wouldn't be as big of an issue and they wouldn't fall nearly as behind. Also meaning now that the stepbrothers would take their spot in the bottom 3 doesn't really matter too much, as the LARPers still get eliminated in this episode. Get to a close race and then they'd magic time spell because they fucking dorks. The bloggers have a confessional expressing annoyance at what Geoff and Bridgette did yesterday, but are able to stop that to be extremely excited about going to Paris. They still take a carpet and throw it off while they are riding the motorbike. It makes the father-son duo crash. Geoff and Bridgette would be able to make it on the first flight like the original, with the best friends, police cadets, ice dancers, Noah Owen, daters, tennis players, and the geniuses. During the flight, Geoff and Bridgette have a confessional talking about their failure at making amends yesterday with the bloggers, so to be safe they think they should try and get an alliance going, and who better than some familiar faces. They approach Owen and Noah, with Geoff beginning the interaction by talking about Owen's teddy, calling it a cute little guy, buttering up Owen but not working on Noah, who asks what they want. They offer to create an alliance together for old time's sake. Owen is excited about the prospect, but Noah was very against alliances at the beginning of the season, taking the game seriously. So Noah explains they aren't looking for anything like that, and with what they heard about them getting into conflict with the bloggers, they don't want any part of it. Bridgette scoffs and says they are nothing to be afraid of, they're just superficial, preppy babies. Noah says, yeah, big babies that almost got another team killed with a carpet. Owen feels obligated to agree with that, calling it pretty hardcore. Geoff and Bridgette see this isn't going to go anywhere, and when the flight attendant scolds them for standing on the plane, they fly towards the back of the plane from the plane landing. The teams on the first flight ride a taxi to the Eiffel Tower, where Bridgette and Geoff come last from the first flight due to flying back from the plane, so having a delay leaving time. Bridgette has to draw a caricature of Geoff, since Jeff's the one who drank the stew. I don't believe that Bridgette has any notable art skills, but that doesn't really matter, as the caricatures don't have to be good as much as they have to be accurate. Jeff's drawing of Brody was fine, so I definitely think Bridgette could draw at or above Jeff's quality and move them forward without a significant time loss. From here, I think the challenge plays out remotely the same. Bridgette is shown to be quite clumsy, so maybe navigating the catacombs would be a bit harder for them, but Geoff and Brody did pretty well by just moving fast and keeping a positive attitude, which I still think Geoff would be able to do for himself and Bridgette. They originally got third though, and now with some of their time loss, I think they lose third to the best friends, but it doesn't really matter. Cadets first, Ice second, best friends third. The bottom 3 would still end up being the Rockers, Noah and Owen because Owen tried to eat the cheese wheel, and then obviously the tennis pros that still get eliminated in close finish with Noah and Owen. The fashion bloggers did not interact with Bridgette and Geoff in the last episode all that much because they're much further behind Bridgette and Geoff at all the times and too busy / excited with the shopping spree they went on in Paris. But now with no distractions and them recently going on a shopping spree, they will enact revenge on them for dirtying up their clothes with their Moroccan stew. These two definitely don't seem like the evil type, just catty more than anything, so I see them creating a catty revenge, not one to like bother Geoff and Bridgette like physically, just something to be annoying and an inconvenience. and with having just gone on a shopping spree, they would sneak into their luggage and take out all their clothes, switching them with some of the clothes they bought that they knew Bridgette and Geoff will struggle adjusting to. I don't have exact outfit ideas lined out, but I could definitely see things like skinny jeans, turtleneck, and a scarf for Geoff, and maybe something like spandex leggings, crop top, and egregiously uncomfortable high heels for Bridgette. Dawn comments on Bridgette and Geoff's outfit choices, with neither of them seeming even slightly happy. They have a confessional together, knowing the culprits for this and being annoyed with it. Bridgette complains about the heels, saying she's worn heels before for some fancy hosting jobs, but nothing as ridiculous as these. They're like walking on toothpicks. Geoff complains about missing his hat and the tight skinny jeans digging painfully into his waist and groin. He also points at the scarf wrapped around his head, saying it doesn't even make sense. Bridgette explains it's a scarf and reaches to undo it, but Geoff stops her, saying he'd rather keep it as a hat, and perilously whispering to Bridgette that he feels naked without a hat on his head. He lets his head fall and closes his eyes, having a moment for his hat. Tom and Jen begin their race later, wearing Geoff's and Bridgette's clothes. They have a confessional, disgusted wearing such total fashion flops, but reassure each other that this is important and so brave of them to do as fashion bloggers to show the world what truly hideous outfits look like. Originally, Brody and Geoff follow the ice dancers, with the plan being to follow smarter teams than their team to copy the lead. We lack the actual scene of Brody and Geoff creating the plan, just them explaining it after the fact, so I can't know for sure if Brody mostly came up with the plan or if it's more of Geoff's plan. Either way, I'm going to say that Geoff and Bridgette don't, because even if they do try to follow the ice dancers, there's no way they'd be able to keep up with them with the ridiculous wardrobes now, meaning they'd be slower than they were in the original, probably finding themselves on the second train exhausted. The second train is the one that the fashion bloggers ended up finding themselves on, so they'd also be here on the train with them, recording a video on their phones, talking loud enough for Bridgette and Geoff to hear about their awful attire choices, even joking about people going to the comments asking if they found them in any local dumpsters. Bridgette and Geoff stare at their clothes, irritated, and yell at them for their clothes back. The fashion bloggers refuse and say they should be thanking them for giving them some actual style to be proud of. Instead, they seem to be wearing a scarf as a head wrap. Geoff doesn't appreciate the insult to head wrap, reminding him of them taking his hat, and stands up to quickly charge at them. But in doing so, his skinny jeans loudly rip, and everyone on the train laughs at him as he covers himself up. The fashion bloggers also laugh, making Bridgette mad for taunting her boyfriend, and also stands up to quickly give them a piece of her mind, forgetting the unbalanced heels she's wearing that cause her to trip when she stands up fast, falling into Geoff, leaving them both on the ground as the fashion bloggers walk off. Once Bridgette and Geoff arrive on the beach, with Geoff being shirtless, having tied his turtleneck around his waist to cover up the hole in his pants, Geoff has to retrieve the next clue from the shark, and I don't think he would do as bad as Brody, because it seems that it would make sense that as a surfer, he should be at least decent at this. And while I could see him going for miserable attempts like Brody trying to grapple the sharks normally, I think Geoff is too out of it with the outfits and missing his hat to have the energy to try something like that. Bridgette tries encouraging him from the shore to little effect. Jen takes notice of this and further taunts Bridgette for it. Bridgette takes a jab at them for riding here on a yacht, but Jen doesn't care and remarks that they still seem to be able to accomplish great things even in their dingy clothes. It's a shame neither of them can take advantage of these finer clothes. They should be experienced with their fancy hosting jobs, but instead, being the failures they are, they end up just damaging the clothes. Bridgette notices a sadness on Jen's face mentioning the damage, and figures out a way to get to her. She takes off her heels and kicks the heels, breaking them off. Jen is flabbergasted and a bit heartbroken. At this point, Tom is back from the sharks with the clue, sharing in Jen's distress. But Bridgette doesn't stop there, taking the heels, digging into the spandex tights around the calves to rip them up, and says she'll stop when Tom gives her Geoff's hat. Tom relents, begging her to stop, and quickly hands it over to stop enduring the pain of watching perfectly fine clothing be destroyed. Bridgette tosses the hat to Geoff, revitalizing him and getting them back in the challenge. Ice dancers would still be first, Owen and Noah would be second, and police cadets would be third. Without Brody in that position with the sharks anymore, Geoff and Bridgette most likely wouldn't find themselves in the bottom three. Brody lost them a ton of time there by being so bad with the sharks. Even more so than the time loss Geoff and Bridgette would have being on the second train, because people on the second train and the third train all outpassed Brody and being able to get the clue from the shark. I do think Bridgette and Geoff would probably be in the lower half of teams to finish, but it doesn't matter. Half the teams finished. The Rockers were originally the ones right in front of Geoff and Brody, so they would now get the poorly working boat and shortly give up before Spud, like Brody, electrocutes himself repeatedly to get their boat moving to the end. The bottom teams of now the Rockers, the Besties, and the Geniuses would still be the bottom three, where the Geniuses get eliminated for oversinking the sandcastle. There isn't much to talk about in this episode because I don't feel that either Geoff and Bridgette or the fashion bloggers would be trying to get back at each other in this episode. The bloggers, again, are not really evil people, and I feel they would be satisfied with their revenge, and after seeing Bridgette's blow up, they would think that they went a bit too far, or at the very least, they'd be too scared to mess with such mental instability again. As for Bridgette and Geoff, I do feel like Bridgette would feel like she struck it to them enough yesterday and doesn't wish to continue the animosity between them by provoking them even more. Geoff is a bit of a harder one, as I do think he'd be quite insulted by what they did, stealing his hat, and is a known pranker, so would be happy to get back at them, but Bridgette is able to convince him not to throughout multiple confessionals throughout the episode, meaning both teams were just complete as they normally did in the original. Bridgette and Geoff obviously weren't the original team here, but I don't think much would change. Geoff was able to originally translate the message by himself, which we know because Brody was still shock traumatized in this episode and non-verbal, so Geoff had no help there, and if Geoff is able to translate by himself, I'd think they do even better at translating now with someone smart like Bridgette to help out. This doesn't interfere with their order of getting on the next helicopter ride though, as they were originally the last team to get on the second one, so the only difference is they'd still get on the second one even sooner, so nothing really changes. For the either or, they would now have to choose the ice picking since Bridgette is a vegetarian and wouldn't be able to eat the animal heads. During this, Bridgette and Geoff would come across the vegans, where Bridgette would try to bond with them over them all having chosen to stick with their vegetarian morals in the either or, but the vegans were shown to be a bit pretentious in the show, and I could very well see this just leading to them calling out Bridgette for not being as mindful, as her only being a vegetarian still using a pickaxe to forcefully remove these precious fossils. Bridgette doesn't dignify their jabs with a response, and just rolls her eyes and continues in the challenge. Bridgette congratulates the bloggers, watching them free one and walk it out, but Jen stares them both down, as does Geoff her. Tom has a confessional with Jen, thinking that Bridgette actually seemed like she was being nice, but Jen dismisses it, remembering how savagely she saw Bridgette tear apart the clothes yesterday, and suggests it's just a trick to lure them into a false sense of security before they strike back. From here the challenge plays out the same. Both Geoff and Bridgette have a good mix of physicality and mental consideration to carefully carve out a fossil. I don't think they would be fast enough to beat the top three teams of the Goths first, Bloggers second, and Ice Dancers third, but I definitely think it's enough to keep them out of the bottom, maybe towards the bottom half, but not the bottom of the daughter-mother duo, Rockers and the Vegans. The bottom might change now, since with Spud ended up shocking himself, has less help in the challenge, so now maybe they'd end up being the last team. I mean, Spud didn't really help that much in any of the early challenges anyways. Still, the Rockers were moments away from losing to the Vegans, so I do think it would be enough for the Vegans to come second to last and the Rockers to now come last. Like the original, Dawn reveals it's a non-elimination, and Lori still freaks out even more so now because they didn't actually even come last, like they did all that to come second to last, to try and save themselves, but it doesn't matter because it was Dawn elimination, so still beats up Dawn, that's all. The race begins with the first 8 teams to get on a charter plane that will take the flight to Brazil 2 hours sooner than the other plane than everyone else has to take. But Dwayne originally broke his fossil on the landing site and caused the first plane to get a flat tire and have to stop to end up leaving after the second plane. What is important to note about this is I do think Geoff and Bridgette and Jen and Tom would both be on the first plane. Once their plane eventually gets to the first part of the race, Bridgette takes Geoff with her to formally apologize to the bloggers about any conflict between them. Geoff glares down Jen and Tom, as Jen glares back at him and Bridgette. However, Tom accepts the apology, insisting he's still not a fan of their fashion, but it is theirs and they messed with it. He knows they'd be pretty mad if anyone messed with their clothes. Jen mutters under her breath, she is. Jen and Bridgette go to the bull ant glove at the same time, where Bridgette tries to offer for Jen to go first as courtesy, but Jen just views it as wanting to take more pleasure from watching her suffer. Bridgette tries to clear it up but is unable to do so and just decides to go first, screaming, making Jen wince. The challenge goes relatively the same until the fashion part. Tom, seeing the opportunity to help make amends, offers to help Geoff out with his fashion design. Geoff doesn't seem too interested, but Bridgette quickly answers for him and says he would love the help, making Tom give Geoff a hand and flash a smile and thumbs up towards Bridgette. Bridgette returns the smile and thumbs up, being surprised when she sees the size of her thumb, reminding her of the earlier glove treatment, making her hand massive. From this reminder, she approaches Jen and asks if she could offer her other hand to help Jen out, suggesting about their inflamed hands. Jen is about to dismiss her, asking why she'd want to help, but sees Tom helping Geoff, realizing that's why, and decides to play nice and guide Bridgette in helping her out. From this insisted interaction, I think the rivalry between these teams would fizzle into nothing, as Geoff and Jen are both very nice and easygoing people, so I think with extended interaction, they'd be able to let go of the aggressions. Both teams finish relatively at the same time, with Geoff and Jen complimenting each other's outfits. Bridgette and Tom sneak a fist bump of each other at being able to squash the beef. Bridgette and Geoff / Tom and Jen would both finish the race probably around the upper half of teams, but otherwise the rest of the challenge plays out the same. Ice dancers first, Goth second, mother-daughter third, and then a bottom of the cadets, the rockers again, and the vegans now coming last due to a time penalty they got and getting eliminated. The race begins with the first half of teams getting onto the first flight to Transylvania, or the second half getting onto the other flight, which is 45 minutes behind. Originally the surfers were able to get onto the first plane, but when it comes to these particular fights, it had very little to do with what teams were ahead in yesterday's challenge, because all the teams had to take the same shuttle to the airport, and it depended a lot more on how motivated / determined the teams were to get onto the first flight. For example, the police cadets who came in the bottom 3 last episode found themselves on the first flight, while the mother-daughter duo who came top 3 didn't get on the first flight. Since I already felt that going into the season, Bridgette and Geoff aren't super determined to win, probably just more excited to travel the world together, and that easygoingness being laid on heavy today because they finally don't have to stress about the rivalry with the fashion bloggers, and the fashion bloggers are on the second flight. Bridgette and Geoff would be slowed down by taking more time to hang out with them, catching up on how they're good now and they're kind of friends. They would now end up on the second flight. This means there's now an extra slot for a team to get onto the first flight with the daters, sisters, cadets, and father-son, and basically on all the other teams that ended up on the second flight, Owen and Noah are the most likely team to now take that spot, as they seem like one of the more determined teams of those teams. Fashion bloggers still get into that spat about who came up with the idea for their fashion blog on the plane when unintentionally prompted by Carrie. Geoff and Bridgette watch from across them as they passive-aggressively go at each other. They have a confessional together where Bridgette feels slightly reassured watching that petty arguing, feeling like Geoff and Bridgette definitely weren't at fault for what started between them. Geoff agrees, saying they just take fashion way too seriously. Bridgette puts a hand on his shoulder and tells him she hasn't seen him take off his hat since they took it. She even saw him leave a shower with it on. Geoff sniffles and exclaims with a shaky voice that he's a victim, while pulling his hat over his eyes. Bridgette cringes and looks at the camera. As the second flight of teams get dropped off at the start of the race, Bridgette tries to get the fashion bloggers moving from their petty drama, asking them if it really matters who started the blog. Either way, it's successful, and they both put a lot of work in it together. Tom and Jen stare at each other compassionately for a bit, looking like that broke through to them, but after that moment, they both talk over each other about how it obviously matters and continue giving each other the cold shoulder. With Noah and Owen taking the place of the surfers, they would now interact as sisters while traveling through the castle for coffins. Owen and Kitty, like later in the season, would be bonding over their positive vibes. Emma would again suggest the idea of both teams splitting off to cover more ground, but more just as an excuse to get the boys off her back. Noah agrees with the thinking and gets Owen to follow him as Owen waves goodbye to Kitty. Noah and Owen have a confessional where Owen is excited to help the sisters out, but Noah shoots it down, saying they won't do that. When Owen asks why, both Noah and Emma are spliced together, giving the same talk to Owen and Kitty respectively, showing how similar they are. Geoff and Bridgette go for a different approach, trying to talk one-on-one with each of the bloggers, walking with more distance between them to try and convince them to stop arguing. Bridgette would talk with Tom, she thinks she'll be able to better make a breakthrough with him, since they both worked together last episode to repair the divide between their teams, leaving Geoff talking with Jen. I don't think either of these conversations would go anywhere. Geoff and Bridgette just really couldn't understand the level of this petty problem and be able to say what they need to hear. Dakota's or Lindsay's kind of people who understand this sort of petty drama, then I think they do a lot better. But both Bridgette and Geoff are very naturally easygoing people who aren't really involved with that sort of catty fights, and even just in general, the bloggers were very resistant to listening to reason in the original, so it would just be a very hard task to get them to forgive each other early that I don't think Geoff or Bridgette have the skill set for. Noah and Owen get to the casket room first, where Owen tries to get Noah to change his mind on trying to find the sisters to show them the room, but Noah doesn't budge. Fate has it the sisters fall from above into the room, to the annoyance of both Noah and Emma. Noah for not being able to keep the room away from the competition, and Emma for them having already been there. When the fashion bloggers / Geoff and Bridgette get to the coffin room, Jen gets into the coffin for her team, Jen and Tom make many quick-witted small jabs at each other. Geoff and Bridgette have a confessional where Geoff is surprised that they can be friends and still be so good at taking digs at each other. Geoff is happy they aren't like that. Bridgette agrees, saying he's too sweet, prompting them to hug, and in the hug, Bridgette also says he's not witty enough, making Geoff's eyes shoot open for a second as he realizes the backhanded compliment. I don't know who of Geoff or Bridgette would have picked up the clue to be forced into the coffin, but I don't think it really matters, as either way, I believe they are both strong enough to be able to lift the other into the grave in a reasonable time frame. Obviously, Geoff does seem like he would be able to lift Bridgette quicker. It doesn't really matter, because if Geoff's carrying Bridgette, he can go faster, but he's going to stay back around the bloggers anyway. So, Ice Dancers still come first, Owen and Noah come second, and Sisters come third. Noah still would have fallen for Emma during the gymnastic jump, and at the finish line, Emma would have scolded them for finishing before them, accusing Owen and Noah of turning on their temporary alliance. Owen steps back and rubs his hands together, ready to hear Noah snap back at her for that, but instead he's too infatuated with her and fully agrees with Emma that they should have talked about it first, pleasing Emma and confusing Owen. Geoff and Bridgette staying back with the vloggers for a large part of the challenge would be near the bottom of the goths, daters, and obviously the bloggers. Geoff has to do the gymnastic course in the bocce watch for his team. He doesn't seem like the most agile person, but we have seen some agile feats from him, and of just how miserable Tom and Ryan were, I think he would be able to finish before either of them. Shortly after Geoff lands his jump, Tom handsprings next but still gets himself electrocuted and injured. Jen worriedly goes to check in on him, resulting in them forgiving each other like the original, now with Geoff and Tom referencing tad bits of wisdom Geoff and Bridgette were trying to tell them earlier, realizing they were right. Geoff and Bridgette tell them they are happy to see them forgive each other, but Tom stands up and pushes them back, telling them to continue ahead. He has a jump to make. Jen cheers Tom as he goes back to try again, and Geoff and Bridgette continue in the challenge. But Geoff and Bridgette would finish about a minute before the goths. Vloggers would unfortunately still be outmatched in the final foot race against the daters, and be eliminated. Geoff and Bridgette are a bit sad about losing their blogger friends, just as they started to become friends. And functional, but being that far back yesterday shows them they have to start taking the race a bit more seriously. And without any more distractions, they think it will be easy, mentioning how dating is one of the strongest bonds any team can form, giving them a good advantage over a lot of the other teams. That line is used as a segue into the daters starting to drift in last place, with Stephanie being overly competitive. All the teams catch up to each other, riding the same flight. The first challenge of this episode was Watch or Watch, where the member who didn't do the gymnastics had to dive into the ocean, find a key, and swim downstream to shore. Geoff did the gymnastics, so Bridgette would do the swimming, and with surfer experience, she'd definitely be an amazing swimmer and get herself and Geoff an early lead over most of the team. I don't think they'd be the first to finish because the ice dancers completed this really quickly, and there is some luck elements to finding a key underwater at all, but I do think they'd be able to get into second. The next challenge involved one of the teammates holding the other in their arms and walking over hot coals. It wasn't directly stated that any specific member of the team had to be carried or vice versa, so Geoff would obviously carry Bridgette because he's stronger and she's smaller than him. Geoff and Brody had an effective strategy in this section of having the carried person try to remind the carrier about a bunch of cold memories to take their mind off the heat. Like in some of the previous episodes, I can't be 100% on if this was a strategy by Geoff or Brody, but since Geoff was the one seen enacting the plan, telling Brody a bunch of cold memories, I feel safe saying it at least crossed his mind, and he would tell Bridgette to do the same for him as he walks over the coals. It proves effective at first, getting them decently far along the coals, but as Bridgette is tracing her mind for memories of cold, she accidentally mentions the Yukon, causing Geoff to remember her kissing Alejandro, make him distracted, and after a bit of arguing between them, he realizes the burning pain on his feet, and without thinking, drops Bridgette on the coals. Bridgette remains on the coals for a bit before yelping and running off them with her grass skirt on fire. Both of them jump into the water to cool off the heat, but then give each other the cold shoulder. If they were pretty far along the trail, I think they would be far enough that Jose, who was originally thrown off the side by Chuck, would hear the whole argument and learn the information that Bridgette once cheated on Geoff, pleasing her as she reveals it in a confessional with Chuck, saying this will give them enough time to overtake the lead again. Chuck is disturbed by the news itself and by how excited Jose is from it, but agrees to take advantage of the opportunity. Not much would change for any of the top placements for this episode. Best friends would still come first. Ice Dancers second, and instead it would be Sisters coming in third instead of originally Noah and Owen coming in third, because Noah remembers the discussion he had with Emma yesterday where Emma felt betrayed by him going first, so him still being infatuated with Emma decides to give them third. Geoff and Bridgette continue giving each other the cold shoulder as other teams stroll by them. Cooling down from the situation and realizing they are losing the lead and being petty like the bloggers, they apologize to each other. Bridgette for what she did with Alejandro / reminding Geoff of it, and Geoff for dropping her onto the coals. As Geoff stares at the coals, he becomes worried thinking that trying to distract cold thoughts won't work anymore because now it leads to Alejandro. Bridgette has a new idea and tells him to focus on this instead, using his hat to cover their faces and hold a kiss with him as he walks over the coals. This proves effective at distracting Geoff from the coals and getting them onto the other side, and I don't think they would have lost enough time to end up in the bottom, so the bottom would still consist of the Rockers, Mom-Daughter, and the Daters. Not that it really matters anyhow, as this was a non-elimination. Because of their setback last episode, I don't think Geoff and Bridgette would be able to get onto the first flight of 6 teams like Geoff and Brody were able to. It means that the father-son duo gets onto the first flight in their place, as they were next in line. So the 6 teams on the first flight is Owen Noah, Sisters, Step Bros, Ice Dancers, Best Friends, and father-son. When Taylor makes Kelly leave her alone, now Kelly wouldn't sit up with the father-son duo since they aren't on this flight. And because Geoff and Bridgette are taking their place, and I don't think any of the other teams seem like very welcoming options for Kelly, she'd sit next to them. They wouldn't be able to share parenting experiences with her like Dwayne did because they aren't parents, but they do talk to her about Taylor, receptive of how poorly she treats Kelly. Kelly doesn't get as outright insulted as she did from Dwayne's direct comment, but Taylor scolds them for speaking poorly on her daughter and say they have no idea what it's like to be a parent. Besides this, I don't see this episode changing much. Geoff and Bridgette would still choose the tennis because they are a more physical team. I see a tiny scene of when Geoff congratulates the twins for finishing the tennis first and cheering for them. Bridgette would have a confessional expressing being proud for the twins and admiration for Geoff's support of them. Also, Emma offering the first place to Owen and Noah this time instead of the other way around, since he did it for them before, and she knows Owen acting as their window cleaners is the only reason they were able to get this far. So top remains the same outside of that, Sisters second, and then twins come in third. I considered if Kelly wouldn't have finally pushed Taylor to treat her like a human being of how to talk with Dwayne, but honestly Kelly didn't seem to take any of it to heart and just happened to get extra annoyed with Taylor's antics today, regardless. So I think Geoff and Bridgette's talk with her and ultimately end up getting them eliminated when she demands respect from her daughter and then still go off on the mall and all that stuff. In the bottom, again, would have still been the Rockers and the Best Friends, because Devin kept reminding Carrie about Shelly, his girlfriend, who is a tennis instructor. The first challenge of this episode was both members team skydiving out of an airplane attached to each other. This seemed mostly luck dependent on just not catching a heavy wind into the parachute to make you fly off course, and because Geoff and Bridgette are around the same placement as Geoff and Brody were, and Geoff and Brody didn't catch a wind, they'd complete the first challenge near the top of the pack. During the first challenge, Kitty tries to call out Emma for liking Noah like the original, even mentioning how she gave up their position ahead of them yesterday to let them have it. Emma's thinking about this, worries that she's letting her feelings get in the way of the game, and denies even more that she has a crush back on Noah, and they just have to focus on the game. The next challenge involved one member making a skewer with insects, scorpions, worms, spiders, etc., and having the other person eat it. I'm not confident on how these creatures translate to Bridgette's vegetarianism, since they aren't directly meat, but I do think they are meat adjacent / like creature alive enough for her to not feel comfortable eating them. So she'd be the one making the skewer, and Geoff would be the one eating it. But I still think Bridgette would struggle a lot making a skewer out of them, feeling bad for the tiny creatures just not wanting to hurt and kill them. Geoff would bond with Devin over trying to have their partner skewer but struggling a lot to do so, because Carrie had a bad experience with bugs so she was also really struggling to do it. This would make Geoff and Bridgette fall near the bottom free, still at the skewer when Geoff and Devin talking to each other figure out ideas to help each other in completing the task. Geoff has Bridgette's eyes covered and holds onto her arms from behind, essentially puppeting her to make the skewer with her hands just without her having to see it. And when doing so, he explains a different activity for each thing she's doing to keep her mind off what she's actually doing. The top positions of this race wouldn't change much. Daters come in first, Sisters come in second, and Owen and Noah come in third. Owen and Noah were originally ahead of the sisters here, but with Emma still denying her crush on Noah, and now messing with the orders in which they gave each other the position ahead of each other. Emma did it last time instead of Noah doing it last time, so Emma would coldly take the position ahead of Owen and Noah when Noah offers. Kitty's annoyed with Emma in confessional, saying the only reason they were able to finish the challenge with her broken reel was because Noah and Owen helped them. Emma says she doesn't care, and they have to focus on the game. That's all this is. A game alliance to help them both, and if they let Owen and Noah take the position ahead of them every time, they're gonna get too comfortable. As for the bottom, I do think Bridgette and Geoff would fall very far behind from struggling with the kebab. Geoff gets to carry Bridgette in the pull cart, which would be quicker than her pulling him, but even then with the recently gross food he ate, he probably struggled running with all the food moving around in his stomach, making it look pretty dire for them as it's seeming like they'll probably come in last. Bridgette and Geoff watch all the other teams getting ahead of them. However, when they get to the finish line, they find themselves not in last, as Don said he would have given the Rockers a time penalty for not having Rock pull the cart like they were supposed to. Even if they were ahead of the Rockers, which maybe they weren't, the Rockers would still end up coming last, because if they get there before Bridgette and Geoff, they still have a long time penalty that they'd have to take. This makes Geoff and Bridgette excited and cheering at having not been eliminated, and the Rockers join them on this cheering once Don reveals it's a non-elimination. The Rockers get a cab first to the airport, where Spud stupidly invites other teams to join the cab, this time including Geoff and Bridgette, because Geoff and Bridgette are taking the game a lot more seriously now, once with the bloggers having that discussion, and almost coming last in the previous episode, so they up their game and they see that opportunity and they take it. Rock suggests to all the teams in the cab that they all have a mega alliance, which the teams say no. However, Geoff is super on board, really gelling with their positive vibes. This makes Spud, like the original, openly reveal his biggest weakness, being gullible and incapable of refusing a dare, openly to the whole cab. Geoff and Bridgette have a confessional where Geoff is amped by Spud and Rock. Bridgette is happy for Geoff and agrees they are full of personality. They should really try to focus on just the game, seeing how poorly they've been doing. And having an alliance with a team as bad as the Rockers probably wouldn't be able to help them out too much. Geoff disagrees and says working with a team worse than them means they never have to worry about the Rockers beating them. It's like a guaranteed safety net for them. Bridgette thinks it through and compliments Geoff for the sound logic, agreeing to an alliance with them, but insists it's imperative that they don't stay back to try and help them, like they did with the bloggers, because that almost got them eliminated. They'll just help them out here and there when they can. Geoff agrees to that, chuckling to himself and doing a bit of air guitars, thinking about what riots they are. Following shortly behind them, Geoff and Bridgette now get into the sauna with the Rockers in shared first place. I'm not going to put them back to the top because yeah, they're going to go back to the bottom soon. This means the Goths would now be sharing a sauna with a different team than the Rockers. I thought about following all the placements to decide which team they'd share with, but it was too hard, and honestly not important because all the teams are struggling too much in the sauna to really be able to talk to each other, so I don't think it would really matter whoever they were with because they probably wouldn't be able to have any sort of meaningful discussion. So I just switched in with the team that Geoff and Brody originally shared with, the Best Friends. And they would now freak out when they see the Goths makeup melting instead of the Rockers. While sharing a sauna, Bridgette tries to talk some strategy of being in alliance with Rock and Spud, which doesn't lead to much strategy talk as they just get excited that they actually have an alliance with a team, play air guitar, and then pass out for a bit from overexerting themselves while overheated. Geoff and Bridgette cross the ice lake, freezing when the cadets dare Spud to kiss a seal, making him have to take it and get attacked by the seal, failing the Rockers behind. Geoff watches back, bummed about them falling behind, and tells Bridgette they have to go help them. Bridgette reminds him of what she told him, but Geoff asks Bridgette if she trusts him. Bridgette responds, of course she does, but they have to keep their mind on the race. Geoff holds Bridgette's shoulders and promises her this is the right thing for them. He just knows it. He feels it in his gut. Bridgette is unsure, however, Geoff then points out that without their help, the Rockers might seriously hurt the seal. Bridgette sees what he's doing, but is unable to stop that thought from crossing her mind, agreeing to head back to help the Rockers and make sure the seal is safe. All the other teams get to the rock and roll stage and fare like getting a positive reaction. Geoff and Bridgette alongside the Rockers arrive backstage out of breath. Geoff points out everyone is still here to reassure Bridgette. Bridgette feels the reassurance for a second, but then says that probably means this challenge isn't possible, asking Rock what it is. Rock looks at the clue, seeing air guitar, and lights up, excited for Spud to show his skills. It's Bridgette's turn for this botcher watch, so she'd have to do the air guitar. She's worried by this because she doesn't know how to go about doing something this ridiculous, and also the last time she was on a stage, it was Total Drama Island where she threw up everywhere, so I think she'd have a little bit of stage fright, at least with a stage like this that's so similar to that sort of setup. But Rock helps her out, telling her to follow Spud's lead. Spud goes out and completes the botcher watch in spectacular fashion. Bridgette is amazed by the performance, but worried that she can't give a showing on that same level. Rock gives her a pep talk and tells her air guitar is just about having fun with it. He takes her hair tie out, letting it fall freely, and tells her to get her inner rock star out. Geoff agrees with Rock, encouraging Bridgette enough to believe in herself and have a great air guitar performance too, landing the Rockers in first place, and Bridgette and Geoff in second. Geoff and Bridgette have a confessional where they're excited about finally getting a top 3 placement, with Bridgette praising Geoff for being right about helping out the Rockers. Geoff resends praise back to her for her amazing air guitar performance. The rest of the challenge plays out the same here. The cadets would get third instead of second, since Bridgette and Geoff took it. The other teams all complete the botcher watch following Spud's example, leaving the bottom 3, the Goths, Noah Owen, and the Twins. where the twins get eliminated when Emma sabotages Mickey to keep Noah in the race. Bridget and Geoff talk with the Rockers in the airport, bonding more over how well yesterday went. Bridget stops the bonding bell to remind them they are still in a competition and urges the Rockers to not have any more setbacks like they did with the Still Dare. Rock and Spud promise they are fully focused on the game and begin rhyming with a jingle about how focused they are, worrying Bridget about how truthful that is. While in the lead area of the Rockers, they would be with them when the daters crash through from off-path after Stephanie became reckless when provoked by the cadets. Bridget and Geoff have a confessional talking about the daters' aggression towards each other, feeling extremely icky about them being together. They admit all couples have their moments where they don't always like each other, including themselves, but nowhere to the extent of what they are seeing with them. They want to get involved before one of them seriously hurts each other, but they also don't want to be the ones to get seriously hurt, so they decide to try and ignore it. Bridget and Geoff successfully take a photo down the waterfall together, shortly after the Rockers. While rafting below, they find Ryan, who rode down the waterfall with no raft after Stephanie knocked him into the water with the oar. Being the kind people they are, they offer him a hand onto the boat, and he begins ranting about Stephanie and tells them the full story. Bridget and Geoff feel awkward as they really don't want to get involved, but after hearing about her hitting him off the waterfall, they quickly take Ryan's side that she went way too far and begin agreeing with him about everything as they naturally align with Ryan's calm, easygoing personality a lot more than Stephanie's aggressive side. Because of this interference, when Ryan and Stephanie are arguing later after they get off the raft riding down the river, Ryan mentions Geoff and Bridget taking a side. This naturally infuriates Stephanie hearing about them getting involved in their matters. The top for this is the cadets coming in first, Bridget and Geoff coming in second, and the daters coming in third. But Geoff and Brody originally placed top 2, and I see Bridget and Geoff doing just as well, so that's why they would take second. The daters still have their short-lived moment of gooey-eyed for each other after getting third, which Stephanie breaks by slapping Ryan to keep them mad at each other because this placing proved they work better when they hate each other. But now Stephanie would sadly look off to the side of Bridget and Geoff, who finished just before them, embracing each other. That their words of judging her makes her scared she wouldn't work as a good partner to Ryan, regardless of the race. The bottom teams would still be the Rockers, father and son because they get completely separated, and then the Ice Dancers. The Ice Dancers still wouldn't be eliminated though because this is a non-elimination, and at the end of the episode they have a confessional, evilly laughing together, showing they plan to play more cutthroat. When the teams are all on the plane and the boomerang is explained to them, Geoff and Bridget catch up with the Rockers to talk about the boomerang. Bridget wants to strategize about who they should play it on if either of them get it, since with their alliance they have a higher chance of them getting the boomerang, because they essentially have 2 shots with both of them to get the boomerang either time. Bud speaks up and says they shouldn't play it on themselves. Geoff and Rock nod their heads and whisper over each other in agreement. Bridget stares at them bewildered. Rock adds on that they shouldn't play it on Geoff and Bridget either, making Geoff and Spud nod in agreement like before, now high-fiving each other as they please themselves with narrowing down their choices so much. Bridget has a confessional of Geoff, questioning him more one-on-one about who he thinks they should use it on if they get it. Geoff says he's bummed about the idea of using it, saying he'd feel bad using it on any of the teams. Bridget smiles as good nature and wanting to focus on just the enjoyment of the race, and agrees with Geoff saying they shouldn't stress themselves out about this race right now. Besides, it's not like anyone is even mad at them. Stephanie smirks from her plane seat when hearing about the boomerang and stares down Geoff and Bridget. She tells Ryan in confessional that if they get it, she is using it on them. Ryan fights back on this since he likes them, and they continue arguing with neither budging. Ryan relents for a bit just to say if she does want to target them, then she has to at least keep her cool around them, because if they find out she wants to target them, then Geoff and Bridget will target them as well. Stephanie scoffs, saying obviously she wouldn't let them know, asking why Ryan thinks she'd struggle holding her anger back. Ryan stares blankly at the camera. Bridget and Geoff still escape the sails with relatively same speed as Geoff and Brody. We didn't see how they escaped originally, but I feel like Bridget is smart enough to go around same speed of figuring out an escape as Brody did. Most of the teams were at the raft building section, with the exception of the stepbrothers and best friends, who are both already on the water, and the cadets and ice dancers, who both boomeranged each other. Bridget and Geoff are working on their raft when Spud and Rock arrive, thematically near the back. Geoff asks them how they got held up and if they got the boomerang. The Rockers explain the cell escape and how they saw the cadets and ice dancers heading back towards the prison, thinking they must have boomeranged each other. Both teams are delighted as they catch up in the challenge, while Stephanie glares them all down. Stephanie mutters to herself about how Bridget and Geoff are probably telling the Rockers about how evil she is, lingering on their every taunting smile. Ryan tries to calm her down and tell her she's looking into it too much, and tries to get her to remember what they talked about with not letting Bridget and Geoff know she just likes them, but he's unable to stop her before she stomps towards them. She lays it into Geoff and Bridget, accusing them of bad-mouthing her, and revealing everything she heard from Ryan about their opinions on the matter. Both Geoff and Bridgette are very intimidated by her strong aggression and try to apologize, but the Rockers double down for Geoff and Bridgette, saying Geoff and Bridgette are great together. Clearly they know something about love that you don't have. Geoff and Bridgette, feeling supported by the Rockers, decide to lay it to Stephanie a bit, voicing how cruelly she treated him last episode. Stephanie tells them this is how their team gets things done. They should have kept their noses where they didn't belong, because now it's on. Stephanie stomps away, while Bridgette, Geoff, and Rock stare her down. Spud is extremely scared of her threat mentioning their nose, as he quickly covers his nose, scared that she's gonna take it. The daters have a confessional where Ryan scolds Stephanie for what she did. Stephanie doesn't care, saying those judgmental hippies deserved every word. Ryan reminds her how stupid they agreed it was to let them know she hates them, asking her what they could have possibly gained from that. Stephanie is now embarrassed, realizing the misstep, and just mumbles that at least they know Geoff and Bridgette don't have the boomerang now, otherwise they would have played it on them there. Ryan sarcastically responds, "Top secret intel there, huh?" The top placements for this would still be the best friends coming in first, stepbrothers second, and father's son in third. Because the ice dancers and the cadets boomeranged each other, they'd still be very far behind in the bottom. Originally the Rockers were the third last team to come in, and I do think there's a chance now that they wouldn't be in this placement because they were collaborating with Geoff and Bridgette, and also I think Ryan and Stephanie would be falling behind now, with Stephanie being so off her game from the whole thing that happened. And the cadets still come last when the ice dancers hit them with their oars to make sure they come in last, but they get saved by it being a non-elimination. Rock still gets his feet hurt when he steps into rabbit holes, and Geoff and Bridgette, being aligned with the Rockers, take a look at his feet, and after seeing the pain, Bridgette suggests he doesn't walk on them for the rest of the challenge. Rock is worried about the idea though, noting that means that Spud would have to succeed at this part for his team by himself, which is cause for concern for obvious reasons. Bridgette and Geoff see the issue, and agree to help them collect rabbits if they finish early. Rock appreciates the gesture, but says they'll get the rabbits themselves to not burden them. Right, Spud? To which he sees Spud eating a whole head of cabbage, trying to eat it a little bit in front of a rabbit so it would think it's tasty, but got distracted. Rock sighs, and Geoff tells them to get what they can, and Bridgette and Geoff run off. They have a confessional where Bridgette mentions that she said she didn't want to stay back to help the Rockers because if it would slow them down, but she's trying to take the race a little less seriously because she really just wants to enjoy this experience, being a good and helpful person when she can. Also, they really stuck out their necks for them yesterday when Stephanie confronted them, so she kind of feels like she owes them this one. Geoff agrees and thinks of how well they all work, they'll be able to get 20 rabbits easy peasy. Geoff and Brody originally were one of the first teams to get all their 10 rabbits, and even though, like a lot of previous other times, we don't actually see how they did it to know if Brody was significant enough to make it not happen now, but I don't know how Brody would be especially talented in rounding up bunnies to have created that difference. Maybe they would be a bit slower than the original, but I still think they'd be one of the first teams to collect all the rabbits. They go in and check on Rock still laying on the ground, asking him how much they have. This is shortly after the point in the episode where Spud got distracted singing the 7 Stages of Heartbreak song to Carrie, where he had 0 rabbits at that time, so Rock would shamefully admit they have 0. Bridgette and Geoff would be a bit bummed hearing about that, but considering how quickly they got their 10, they try to not let that demoralize them. They take the Rockers' bunny bag and give their full one to Rock to keep an eye on, as they go back out to try and collect more for them. Originally, the ice dancers used Brody's crush on MacArthur to have him go help her after they let her into the water, after covering a rabbit in white powder to make it look like the albino, and stole the surfer's bunny bag to win the challenge easily. Now without Brody on the team, they wouldn't have that way of getting their bunnies. However, given the circumstances of Rock holding their bunny bag by himself and with 2 twisted ankles, I don't think the ice dancers would have a hard time distracting Rock and attempting to steal the bag of bunnies. So while Jock is distracting Rock, Jose quickly pulls her bag over him from behind, ties it up, and steals their bag for themselves. The daters would still struggle getting more than 2 rabbits, but luckily their rabbits procreate, giving them a full 10. But instead of this being a moment for them to sing about love and feel it for each other, Stephanie would spoil the moment of attraction by focusing back on the race, because she still has the comments Geoff and Bridgette made about her as a partner in the back of her mind. Top placements would involve the ice dancers getting first, Goffs getting second, and the daters getting third. Geoff and Bridgette return to Rock with Spud and a nervous sack full of 10 rabbits, but now completely exhausted, having to do the challenge a second time. They only see the bag shaking around with Rock's body, Spud suggesting that maybe all the bunnies fused together into one. Geoff puts an ear towards the bag and hears the complaining of Rock, making him jump into action to free him from the bag. Rock is happy that Geoff saved him, but both Bridgette and Geoff panically ask him where the bunnies went. They both feel defeated as they know there's no way they can get a third bag of 10 bunnies in time, but Spud still has a shining moment of wringing out a snake that ate 10 bunnies whole to get them all into the Rocker's bag, with the other 3 all cheering him on. Both teams submit their bunnies, allowing them to continue in the challenge. I believe the eliminations for this episode would still be the same, as the Rockers mostly fell behind enough at the end portion due to Spud flying the plane and having too bad a reaction time to dodge the mountain. That would still happen, and the Stepbrothers being dumb, chasing the kangaroo as the albino bunny, which I haven't been covering because it's all the same as the original, so yeah, obviously that would still happen, leading to the double close finish, where Dawn reveals a double elimination, and eliminates both the teams. Besides that, the other bottom in them are the cadets because they got tricked by the ice dancers and lost a lot of time. And that is the first part of what if Bridgette and Geoff competed in the Ridonculous Race together. Sorry for breaking this pretty short what if up into 2 parts. I've been really busy with classes starting up again, and I took too long on this video alone, so I didn't want to delay it even more just to have it all come out in one part. I have started some of the writing for part 2 already, so hopefully it shouldn't take as long to get out as this first part. But as for speaking on this first part, I really enjoy how this what if is going. I was kind of right in the beginning when I said not a ton changes with the story and the eliminations. Everything is still pretty concisely and close to the original. But I do just think it's really fun to consider the dynamics of Geoff and Bridgette and the dynamics of how they work with other teams. I really liked writing for the short-lived rivalry with the fashion bloggers because I don't feel like there are a lot of times where 2 nice groups of people, calm-tempered, not evil people, get into a rivalry like that. So I think it was fun to explore the dichotomy of isn't just straight out aggressive or super antagonistic towards each other. Quick resolution to all that, more fun. I do wish they would have been able to stay a bit longer after that, but it happened the way it happened, and I also think it was kind of good for Geoff and Bridgette to disconnect them for a bit so you could focus more on their personal dynamics of especially how they do the race, because it is a big one I'm trying to consider with them, working this balance of trying to have fun doing the race together and having a good time, but also taking the race seriously enough that they don't get eliminated. Anyways, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.